Hey, hey, Jan. Hey, Rob. Hey, Ben. G'day, Andrew.
G'day, Brad. G'day, Rob.
Hey,
Morning,
hey,
Brad.
hey, guys. G'day. This is Mike. Everyone said Mike's online with us.
Good morning, everyone. If I say evening, it's because that's what it is here. So,
Yeah, yeah. Opposite sides of the world. It's warm there, cold here. I see we're
yeah,
all in jumpers this side of the world. I've been suffering a
yes.
little bit of a cold, guys.
Mhm.
Hmm. There's more people coming on. How's everyone been? How have you been, Andrew? Good, mate.
Yeah, good, thank you. Bit chilly this time of year, but yeah, not too
Yeah,
bad.
that's good. Ben, haven't seen you for a while, mate. Have you been faring well?
Yeah, doing well, mate. It's just sort of busy, coming into the second half of the year, so that's good.
Oh, that's the way. That's the way. Well, guys, we'll just say, Rob, good to see you. You're up in Mackay this morning, Rob? Mate, cold up there or actually half decent warm? Mackay's up in the
Oh,
north, mate.
yeah, but it's
Okay.
still probably only 10 degrees or something this morning. It's nice and fresh, clear blue sky. It's been like that for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mike, off of Mackay, you got the Great Barrier Reef. I guess, did you get up north when you came to
I
Australia, Mike?
did. We made it. Yeah, we made it all the way up to the Great Barrier Reef. Yes.
Yeah, it's impressive. Well,
Mhm.
guys, we might kick off. Hey, Jan, good to see you again.
Morning all.
Hey, mate. We'll kick off and I'll keep bringing people in as they come. So, everyone, really pleased today to have Mr. Mike Hoseus with us today. It's a real pleasure, Mike. Like, really appreciate the time and you coming on to spend time with us here in Australia. Everyone, we're going to be talking about organizational culture and how to really go about creating that high performance culture and connecting the individual culture to the organization. I think Mike and I were chatting before the event here this morning that I've connected with a lot of people from Toyota over the years who haven't really known what happened under the hood. How did Toyota create that culture? The thing that is dramatically unique with Mike is he wrote the book Toyota Culture, but also in the first podcast that we spoke about, Mike, you just blew me away with how much you knew under the hood of what actually creates that culture. And so I'm looking forward to that chat. Everyone, one thing I want to talk about, I'm going to share it at the end too. There is there is an option for study tours in America that Mike's running and Mike's son runs around the world. So there's one happening in Kentucky. And Mike, do you mind just mentioning this one, mate? Like it's in Kentucky. You're leading it. Do you mind just giving a quick
Yeah.
1 minute
I
overview on
mean,
it for those that are interested in it?
sure. We do it twice a year. We're open. I do 4 or 5 with private companies with their leadership teams, and it's really helpful for leaders uh, because we have the discussion on the culture and things, and then we go to see it. We go to Toyota and take a tour there and talk with TSSC, which is the Toyota TPS, kind of the internal trainers there. And then the other 2 days, we go to 2 other Gembas and 2 other organizations that are focusing on this culture transformation. And the participants get to talk to, they see Toyota and they see kind of, Disneyland, sometimes people call it, and they see this ideal, but it seems like a faraway process to get there. And then they go to other Gembas that are working on it and having the same challenges, the same barriers, but working through them. So it's really helpful to talk to those leaders and to see it happening. And then again, to have that team of leaders from your company to then go back with an action plan to start again driving this organizational culture to drive your performance results back home. So the best I guess endorsement of it is that we have companies that send teams repeatedly to build that momentum. It's really part of their personal development, organizational development for these folks to then get on board with the transformation. So we got the opportunity again in October, and I was talking to Brad. We can get some discount because you heard it here or whatever, or network with Brad, so we can work that out if there's any
That,
interest.
That'd be great, Mike. So I'll send that round everyone after the event, and we can get that out there. So let's get into it, team, because I'm gonna Mike and I will just have a chat for a few minutes on the topic, and then we'll just open up the questions. So, Mike, with it in the podcast that we did a few years ago now, the thing that really blew me away was how succinctly you describe how to actually connect people to culture and lead a culture aspect as well as performance. You know, we're talking about performance and all that, but we're talking a lot about the culture piece. Do you mind just giving a bit of a background on that, Mike? Like how you go
Sure.
about it and what you've seen work?
Yeah, again, I tried to put it into words with the culture book, and that was part of my journey. With Toyota, I was hired as the 201st person in Kentucky, which is now the largest Toyota plant in the world, over 8,000 people. And they, we were the first Toyota plant anywhere in the world outside of Japan to be wholly owned by Toyota. So there's partnerships even in Australia and different places, but this was the first wholly owned plant outside of Japan. So they sent 400 Japanese trainers to teach us the Toyota production system. But I tell people, more importantly, the culture, which they didn't call it at the time, but the way that we think and lead and behave as leaders. And so I had that as a supervisor. So every supervisor and above had a personal coach for that first couple of years. And then they were tapering that off, right, for self-sustaining, because they were teaching us to be the coaches. And so, but after those couple of years, there was less, but we added a second shift. So every assistant manager and above had a coach, and I was promoted to assistant manager. So I had about 200 people that I worked for, where I had 20 that I worked for as a supervisor. So we had good success again. We added a second plant. So now I was promoted to manager and had working for about 1,000 people, and now had a Japanese manager teaching me that role. More growth, and I was an executive. I had both assembly plants working for 2,000 people, and now I had an executive coach from Japan teach me that role. So again, just really immersed in the thinking way, which is again the behavioral way, right, for leaders. And then my real transition happened when part of the development at Toyota, you rotated horizontally as well as growing vertically. And I was asked to go to human resources, and I actually fought that at the time. I didn't want to go to human resources, but they suggested I did, and I lost that negotiation, and I went, and I was quite glad I did after I got there, because I wrote in the book, that's where I learned the people systems, where I was kind of like you said with these other Toyota people. When I was in operations, I was a fish in water. I didn't know how the water got there, and I took it for granted. And then when I got to HR, then that's where I learned some of these intentionality of these systems that drove the culture, like you said, that drove the performance. So it was really that putting together the operations, what I call the product value stream with the people value stream that really turned the light on for me. Because it was funny, I would be at Toyota and I'd hear, it's all about the production system and the operations and the standard work and the just in time, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I got to HR and they're like, well, it's all about the people. And then of course my reflection was it's both, and putting it all together. So that was the impetus why I wrote the book, because there's organizations that were putting these tools out there and doing the processes, and they weren't sustaining, they weren't sticking, and they were wondering why. And they were missing, in my opinion, these people, including the people part of it, which was also the purpose part of it, where you mentioned those values and things. So that was the impetus for the book, and I think it was those two perspectives from operations and human resources that really again lit the light for me. So then I've spent the last 25 years, challenged with how do I explain this to people, and again to get them to where you as leaders are able to work on your culture instead of kind of being in it. There's some good quotes from some leaders, Peter Drucker and different ones, and if you're not working on if you're not managing your culture, it's managing you. Peter Drucker was, culture eats strategy for breakfast or something like that. So, and a lot of us leaders aren't understanding culture, aren't understanding what drives it, and therefore aren't spending time on it. And it's a miss. So I appreciate Shingo. Brad and I were talking about Shingo model as well before you all got on, because my book won the Shingo prize, but then also during COVID, I had nothing to do. So I took all the Shingo workshops and got certified to train them. And it's just real quickly, it talks about systems, and it talks about systems that drive behaviors, and it defined your cultures, as the behaviors of your people. And so it's our systems that we have drive the behaviors that drive your business results. And then you got to go up to the role of the top leaders of the organization, and ask the question: is the culture in your organization intentional or accidental? And I was asked that at a conference one time, and I was like, "That's a great question." And obviously, we want it to be intentional, and you want yours to be intentional, but it's not always that way. And so when we're intentional about it, then the top leaders can define the desired state, the ideal state, the future state, right? All those lean terms. Because as Toyota would say, down on the floor with 5S or standard work, if there's no standard, there's no problem. Well, you as top leaders, if you haven't set the standard for your organization on how to behave and how to think and how to act, then people can behave and think and act any which way they want, and there's no problem. Yeah. But if you set a standard for your organization, then we can say no good. And when I have more time and in Kentucky and stuff, I'll tell all the stories, and there's a lot of them where I was told, Mike's son, no good, right? And I took that personally at first, but then I realized there's nothing personal about it. There was a clear Toyota standard, again, on your thoughts, your behaviors. And if your thinking and behaviors weren't in line with that standard, then you were told no good. Just like when we're comparing a part on the car to the standard, it's either okay or no good. So anyway, so it was that, again, that understanding of what's going on below, under the hood, but also spending time under the hood with so living in the system. But then, like Shingo teaches, we as leaders, we don't want to be in the system. We want to be working on the system.
Yeah. And that whirlwind of the day-to-day nowadays can suck leaders so easily into the system, can't it? Mike, I love that language of the people value stream. And I remember in the podcast that story you told about, Michael's son, no good, but how does it show up at Toyota, or how does it show up at other companies that you've seen where they've actually been able to define culture and behaviors, define ideal behaviors, and start to really lead it and live it because there's a standard? What are some examples you've seen?
Yeah, when I'm working with other companies and I've seen some examples, I try to simplify it. Toyota, and that was another aha moment for me at Toyota. I came out of college and, things, and where, you're writing these big papers and making things complicated and complex. And then I get to Toyota and they're like trying to break everything down so where it's simple. And they would say to where elementary school student can understand. If you make it to where elementary school student can understand, then we got a chance, right? So they're always just very simple on it. So anyway, so when I tell people, simplified Toyota culture is everybody's a problem solver, and leaders are problem solving and teaching and leading and coaching people to problem solve. And again, and working on the systems that create problem solvers and coaches. So that's in a nutshell the defined behavior, because, you got the continuous improvement with problem solving, you got the respect for people. And again, Toyota would say my biggest behavior as a leader of showing you respect is by developing you and investing in you.
A leader who serves the growth of the people around them.
Yes. So anyway, so I've had companies that have done just that. And again, most of the time, and I'm working Brad asked, what am I doing now? And I'm doing a lot of these things and the Kentucky things. But I've got 3 or 4 Gembas, that companies that I'm working with still, and to keep it real. And that's what, got a company in Mexico that I'm working with right now, and they are bought in and invested. And I think we started our 4th year, beginning of this year, and just like that, we did Gemba walks, and their floor people were not solving problems. They were firefighting. They were fixing things, keeping the line running, keeping the product flowing, and which is very, 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 very common. And I stopped at an hour by hour one, talked to the team leader and translator, and I'll give you the example. The line, they had lost 25 some minutes or so. It was over 20 minutes on their line on this 1 hour. So I called them over, like, what happened? Why? Because they had on their 25 minute down. I was like, okay, that doesn't tell me much. Why was it down? So I tried my 5 whys. Well, the printer wasn't working. Okay, why wasn't the printer working? And then I asked another why, and then I got a blank look. And then the leader of the CI said, we're not asking that of the team leaders. We're only asking them to keep the line running. We're not asking them to ask why the printer ran out of ink, and what can be done to keep it from happening again. And why did it take 25 minutes to put a new cartridge in? Probably because there wasn't, one handy or whatever, right? So, but I was told not to go any further, because the role was not to go any further. Their role was to get the line up and running. So then back at, the headquarters, so to speak, we had a really pointed discussion, like, do you want your team leaders to be problem solvers? Yes, of course. Okay. Simple, but not easy. Brad and I just had that conversation also. So that was a simple decision. But now it was, okay, now let's get to work. So now we're working with HR. We're defining the role of the team leader. We're defining the promotion. How do we promote and select? What the Toyota Culture book goes to, right? How do we select those folks? How do we train them, onboard them, and their role with standard work and developing standard work? Because that's the other thing. Operator standard work is non-existent in other organizations. I'm telling you, 95 out of 100, I get work instructions, technical instructions, engineering instructions. I don't get operator standard work. And operator standard work is for improvement. And it's like the basic common sense stuff. The engineering stuff is the technical specs and all that, and we need that. But we also need, or want, the operators, again, being problem solvers and making improvement. So again, when we say simple, hey, you want your team leader to solve problems, yes, but now we got to work on the systems, both the people systems and the production system, because they didn't even have operator standard work. So again, we're working on that technical part of it, as well as now the people part of it, to that role of the team leader as problem solver, and the same thing with the group leader and the supervisor. So that's going now. And we just had report outs the last couple quarters from the team leaders, and the CEOs and the directors are amazed, like, wow, look at these people. And the one CEO said they were loading boxes a month ago. Now look at them, and now they're leaders, and they're talking to the CEOs face to face. And so it's really cool. And so the magical thing then is that when we have the floor people, the team members, team leaders, group leaders working on that basic daily problem solving, ask why, then the real cross-functional supplier engineering problems then are lifted up to the next level of problem solvers, right? That value stream level. So we're now able to work on that, which now then the strategic long-term problems can be worked on by the leaders, right? The senior leaders. So what happens, the inverse of that, unfortunately, right, is that the work teams are firefighting. So then the managers, engineers are pulled into all that junk, right? All the standard work issues, training issues, instead of those, again, system problems. And then the leaders are pulled out into the system, and then who's doing the strategy. So we want everybody solving problems at the right level. So the biggest gap, again, is usually the strategic level and the day-to-day level. So.
Yeah, it's really insightful, like how getting that, I can really see the importance of really being tight with people and culture, or HR, because it is all those people systems and people approaches that allow you to then do the right things to get the right capability at that team leader front line. And then it then just frees up time above. Mike, what are some of the key leadership behaviors that you see that we need from above to be and able to enable that to happen? Like, I'm guessing it links to a leader who's focused on serving the growth of people around them as one of them. What other key aspects do you see in that space?
Well, again, this company in Mexico is dedicated and invested. So they've sent all the leaders to problem solving training, the 8-step A3 system problem solving training, because you can't expect it and coach it if you're not able to do it. So that's again where I go back to everybody's a problem solver, and then leaders are teaching and coaching it. So you can't lead and coach what you can't do. So you have to do it and then lead it and coach it. So that's a behavior, right? Both of those. And again, those are the core ones we would say that you're problem solving and not firefighting, and that you're then teaching your folks and asking why. I got another quick story because, I had another Gemba walk again in Mexico, and at a food company, and there was another line down. Now I had one of my network was there in maintenance, working with these team leaders in maintenance, and so he even gave them a little 5 why tool. And so I went on my Gemba walk and went around to the board, and we found I got to one that had red on it, so I was asking why, and they pulled, and I said, well, this day right here has got a lot of red, so I want to know what happened there. So they look it up, they pulled out the thing, and the electric panel blew a fuse, and they had a 5 why tool that the Toyota guy had given them to fill out. So I got excited, like hot dog, and I needed a translator, and I started going through it, and I'm like, this is sounding not good. I'm like, please tell me that the final why is not replaced, or the final countermeasure was not replace the fuse.
Mm.
And she said, the countermeasure is replace the fuse. Well, how did they get that with asking 5 why?
Yeah.
So then they went through it, and it was totally circular, but the panel got wet, and so the fuse blew, and so the thing they replaced the fuse. They didn't ask why the panel got wet, and how to. So at that point, I said thank you to the team leader, because it wasn't a team leader problem at that time. It was a coaching problem at that time. So you said, what are the key behaviors? It's like, where was the supervisor coaching that poor team leader when the poor team leader is filling out a 5 why, and he stuck it in there from last month, and nobody ever said anything to him? So that wasn't a team leader problem. That was a coach problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what's missing, and we can do the same examples from a senior leader down to a manager or whatever. So, and again, that's what Toyota would call respectful. And we call, when I first did the book, I remember the editor saying, where's all your classes, training classes to be a manager at Toyota? There's nothing in here. And so I went back and put together a little page, and I made the point, there's a big difference between development, on the job development, and training.
Yeah.
And like, even for that 8-step problem solving, that's a half day training. And then you spend days and hours, right, of coaching the A3s and following up, and that on the job development. And so that's the leadership behaviors we're shooting for, right?
I really sense that, Mike. Like, I guess all of us on the call would have experienced that piece where you go to training or you train someone, and then without any sort of support after, very little will actually cut over, because on the job training is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, that 5 why chain, he probably had a little hour training on how to fill that out. But then without the development, it was useless, right? It had nothing. So I don't want to miss the other one because I liked your question. So let me make sure because I jumped into problem solving, but I want to make the distinction between problem identification and problem solving. And when I first got to Toyota, the Japanese distinguished those and separated those. And at first it was like, it didn't make sense to me. It's like, what why would they have problem identification and problem solving? It's like, isn't it the same thing? And like, then I learned, no, it's not the same thing. And, you know, and the tools and the value stream mapping and the visualization and the standard work and the 5S are all meant to identify problems, right? And just like we said, when we set a standard, no problem. So we set a standard so that there's a problem. But, you know, so first we have to understand that from a technical point of view with the tools. Again, no standard, no problem. Because I asked the Japanese when I wrote the book, you know, what challenges did you have with us? And I remember two of them had the similar answer. We're putting in a system that's trying to bring problems to the surface, and the Americans are running around kicking it under the carpet and putting up the smoke screen and pointing both directions, you know, and because we didn't understand, right? That problems is what it's about. It's supposed to expose the problems, and we're not used to that with our pride. And so that humility and that humble leader is a big part of it. Now, also, you know, I had just some discussion with another webinar here a week or two ago from an author over here who wrote the book Mistakes That Make Us. Yeah. And that psychological safety is what he's coining it. And he called me because the only thing he could find in the lean literature that mentioned it was Toyota culture, because I told the stories about, again, how I would be trying to hide a mistake and be told no good, right? And so that the leaders were promoting this, bring the problems to the surface so that we can solve them. You know, the Japanese would say no problem identification, no problem solving. So now we're talking about the emotional, the culture, that the leader's making it safe to bring the problems to surface. And man, that is not usual either. And we're having that challenge in Mexico as well. That it's just not in our human nature to say, hey, I screwed up, right? So, or I'm not hitting goal. I remember, well, I told Brad I was in Australia, and so I twice, if not three times. But I went to a couple of plants because my son was working with some lean group over there. But I remember the one Gemba walk, and I got the Australian, because I would go through like the Japanese, what problems are you having, right? And we learned really quick at Toyota not to say none. But at the plant in Australia, I got all the way through. No worries, no worries, no worries. So at the end, I got to say, no worry is big worry, right? So, yeah. If you don't have any worries, you know, and that was Ono's thing. The man who says they have no problem has biggest problem of all, or something like that. Too true. So again, is that, do we have the leadership behavior that your folks are safe to bring problems to you and not get their head chewed off? You know, I've had different leaders and different stories. You know, I remember the one CEO saying, I've learned to bite my tongue, you know, when they bring me these things. And I'm like, why is this happening? And why are you letting it happen? And why just now? Haven't you been there 20 years or whatever? And then like, I bite my tongue and I say, thank you. And now we can work on the problem. And that's what I said in this other webinar, like the culture that was so freeing, because we didn't have to waste time and effort on smoke screening and deflection. We could get right to the root, go right to the root cause and keep it from happening again. And those were the two leadership questions. So I'm glad I got around to it for those behaviors you asked for. So we were taught to say, again, when we have these big problems, any problem, but we had some big ones. I mean, multi-million-dollar ones. And we were taught to say, what have we, so first of all, thank you for letting us know. What have we learned and how are we going to keep it from happening again? Yeah. And both of those are key, because the first one, the Toyota way would have the respect for people and the CI, the continuous improvement. And that what have we learned? That's the respectful question. And sometimes people will even stop me before I get to the second one. They're like, oh, so Toyota's just Disneyland. You can just make problems and everything's fine. Like, no. I had one trainer say, Mike's son, one problem, okay. Two problem, no good, right? So what are you doing after the first one to keep this second one from happening? That's the CI. That's the second question. How are we going to keep it from happening again? And I tell people on your problem solving, oh my gosh, there's so much firefighting, just like we said there with change the printer cartridge, change the fuse in the electric panel that got wet because they sanitized the area, and no root cause, nothing. And of course, that's going to happen again next week, next month, whatever. So again, it's where that coaching comes in. It's like your supervisors and your managers are at those huddles where they are reporting that out and they're accepting those answers. And so I try to tell them, like, all you have to do is ask the question, will that action keep it from happening again? And I do it when I'm out at a game, because I practice in front of them. Because that's what Troy said. I don't need to know anything about the area technical wise to help them problem solve. Just have to ask the right questions, right? And so, is that going to keep it from happening again? Is a darn good one, because the answer you'll get 9 times out of 100 is no. But then it's them thinking, well, let me go back and try again. Great, we'll talk again tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah, I can really sense, Mike, that power of, the coaching piece, and that constant coaching and support, is such a key aspect of this. I want to just swing back to one more thing before I open up the questions to everyone. So everyone, please think about your questions, and you can either put your hand up or go to chat. Mike, the question I got is, I want to just wind back to, you mentioned that saying, no standard, no problem, right? So no standard, no problem. And I really got the piece around then the part that visualize process 5S and all these aspects help you to be able to see the problem, Mike, can you explain what some of your teams did to create a standard that was visible or conscious for culture, where you then had a cultural standard so that you could know when you got a problem culturally that you could then do root cause on?
Yeah. So that's the idea again. So everyone a problem solver, leader is coach, and teacher a problem solver. So that everyone a problem solver, like I say, in Mexico, we're working in on the team leaders, supervisors, then what we said. Everyone a coach, then that is a cultural standard, right? The leader is coach. And this is from personal experience, because those were unfortunately repeated no good Mike sons. Because I was promoted, I was young, I'm type A, running around trying to keep the line running again. And so Brad has a problem, calls me over. And so I'm like, so I fix your problem for you. I solve it, and you say thank you, and I say you're welcome. And then my trainer says, no good, Mike son, right? And I'm like, why no good? He has no problem anymore. The line's running. And I'll ask my classes that, why no good? Because you didn't teach him. Again, I had the Japanese, like, you give him fish, you didn't teach him to fish.
Mm.
Your role, your standard is that you teach. Oh, you see where I'm going, right? So again, I had one trainer say, Mike son, you show him disrespect. I'm like, I can understand the problem solving and not teaching. How did I show him disrespect? He said, you told him he was either not capable or not worthy of teaching how to do by himself. I'm like, well, I didn't mean to teach. I didn't mean to tell him all that. And so that's an example of a cultural standard, a behavioral standard that will drive your culture.
Mm.
And again, that's part of that serpent. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to have to take it off the hook.
Yeah, and then I think it's interesting too, team, isn't it? When I did the podcast with Mike, it really came through clear that once you've got these behavioral standards, you can then coach them and lead them because you can see the problem and you can talk to the problem.
That's
right.
And
I think, Mike, you mentioned also too, sometimes team charters were used where a team might put it into their language as a team charter in their team also.
The charter was more for problem solving, scope and things. I like where you're going with the behaviors, and again, and Shingo does the same thing. And even when the Toyota Way model came out in 2001, it was these principles. Again, from the Shingo model, that's the upper leadership, and those came from Japan, and those were the continuous improvement, respect, and then broke it down with teamwork and Genchi Kibutsu, et cetera. But then what they had us do was to define behaviors. And again, we did a good and no good behaviors around that. Because to your point, now we can coach and teach, and we can say no good, Brad. But on those. So that's what I tell people to do, right? To the top leaders can do those principles. And again, Shingo has that Shingo booklet. I tell people to go on the website and get that. It's like 60 pages of gold. And all you gotta do is put your email in there and they'll send you it. But it's got good examples of behavior for, enterprise alignment and continuous improvement, so that's the key to me, because then those are your systems, right? Then you can build those into how we hire people, how we promote people. And I'll go back to that again with I gave you the examples on the floor with coaching and teaching and that. Again, the key with the under the hood is now that's built into the people systems. So that's how we hire people, how we promote people. So we're not promoting the people that are out there like me that we're gonna, that didn't change, that just kept driving and telling people what to do and directive and command and control. And so that those behaviors weren't reinforced by promotion. The behaviors of the Toyota way, if you were doing those, then you were reinforced with a promotion. So that's awesome. The system. That's the system thing, right?
Yeah, which is very much, I guess, as we know it, it's all the systems and approaches that sit in people and culture. It really sounds that's where a lot of the secret sauce is us really working on that side of the business and then helping to build that capability. Mike, I really appreciate the knowledge and insights and help for us here on that topic. And mate, it's the podcast we did together was one of the best I've ever done. And this conversation's been insightful for me. Thanks heaps, mate. I want to hand it over to the group now. And I know, Ben, Ben's already put a question. Ben, do you want to come off mute and just ask it, mate? It might be good if we now enter into a bit of an open conversation.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Mike. That was really, really informative, mate. So my question for you is, what's one action that the group could take to apply the principles that you've outlined?
Yeah, I always tell people that, so I liked how you said that, what's one action to take? Because I find that people want like a recipe, like what's the recipe? And I always tell people, if somebody's telling you like there's a recipe for this lean transformation, I would be wary, because there's industry's different, your organization's different, your different states of the economy, different challenges, different workforce. So the recipe I learned at Toyota was plan, do, check, act, right? And so like in Kentucky, we'll go over a purpose, process, people, and problem solving, and then you'll do kind of a high level assessment, so that, because that's what I tell them, that's what I was taught at Toyota. I went into a problem supplier, and you assess the current situation, and then you sit with them to prioritize those gaps and which ones will be most impactful, right? So there's lots of steps you could take, and you want to find what's your most impactful step you could take for your organization with your, again, current state. But so generically speaking, I always tell people too, though, that you can't go wrong with problem solving. Now I add on to that a little bit. I just had a discussion yesterday with another company, because I was asked a similar question, and Toyota, I told them, they gave us three things to start with: standard work, a scoreboard, and problem solving. Again, as a team leader, group leader, or work team. Now again, those sound simple, but it's not easy, because I've already made the distinction of standard work. At least I think I did. I had another webinar this morning, so if I repeat myself, I apologize. And I did say that this afternoon, right? So the most standard work out there is work instruction, not operator standard work. So it's the operator standard work did I talk about operator standard work? Again, I had another webinar like 4 hours ago.
No, Mark, if you don't mind going a little bit more into operator standard work, that'd be great, mate.
I will. It really was it was this morning. It's coming back to me. So when I go into an organization and I ask for well, first of all, what I asked this morning is, and I did the old poll questions before, I don't want to forget his question, by the way, but but I'm answering it. But I'm taking a little detour here. I asked, what is the purpose of operator standard work? And I used to do the formal poll right on Zoom. Is it safety? Is it quality? Is it trainability? Is it all the above or none of the above? And this morning we had, I think, 100 people on there, and I said, just put it in the chat, and it rolled, all the above, quality, safety, all the above, quality, safety, all the above. And I told them it was not a trick question, but a tricky question. That the answer is none of the above. Because I asked you what the primary purpose of operator standard work is, not what advantages and benefits. Of course, we want those things. And then I said, it goes back to the role of the team member, right? So every company has the role of the team member doing a job with safety and quality, right? And follow instructions and da. Where Toyota was different, remember we said, everybody's a problem solver. So they built that into the role, they built that into the standard. So your job is not to just do your job. That's like a given and a known. Your job is to improve your job. So again, simple but not easy, but huge. So operator standard work, most times I go to a Gemba and ask for standard work, they give me a work instruction. They give me an engineering instruction, a technical instruction, which we had at Toyota. Those were done by the engineers, and it told me how to technically build the car. This operator standard work is how to do it, how to drive improvement. The purpose of operator standard work is none of the above, because the purpose of it is to provide the basis for improvement. So again, most companies don't have improvement or problem solving as a role of the team member, much less the technical tool on how for them to do it. So the operator standard work is the tool for them to drive the improvement and to solve problems. So that's operator standard work. So again, if that's not there, then how are we going to ask the operators to do that? So that's where, again, the people meet the process. So do you have operator standard work? So anyway, so they gave us that because another question I had this morning was, I've got people who aren't following the standard work, or they don't agree with it, or they argue it. And like, well, probably because they didn't have a say in it. So why do you give people a say? And then I get the answer, well, for buy-in. I'm like, no, we had the operators engage in standardized work because they're the experts. Like, that was our true north, right? Because they know it better than I do. They know it better than the engineer. Now, the engineer knows, again, the bolt and the tightness. The operators know the way to best do that safely and quality. So the operators are going to write that standard work. Of course, the team leader has the role to put it together, but they're getting that buy-in. They're getting that input, and then as a result, getting the buy-in. So I said we would still have arguments and disagreements, but it would be during the process of developing it, not after it's developed. After it's developed, now you're working on doing the next improvement. So anyway, that's a little insight into operator standard work. Then we have a scoreboard. Now the scoreboards, again, another pet peeve. Because when my scoreboard as a supervisor was my work, it was my downtime, it was my defects, not supplier, not the group in front of me, not the group after me, it was what I owned. Now, I put this in a way because some people say that, well, then how did they have the teamwork, So Toyota had a fantastic way in that culture to define the responsibility and ownership, but still have the teamwork. So, because I went to a Gemba last week, and at the end of the 2 days, the vice president was like, we got to clear the fog, because I kept asking these questions of who owns it and who's this and why did you miss goal? Well, because we had a holiday in May. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's foggy. They're talking about paid hours and things. I'm like, that's fine to report to the, I know you have to pay for those hours, but that's not a KPI for the floor on what they own and what they can control and what you're holding them accountable to improve. Come on. So anyway, so the scoreboard is your scoreboard or your team scoreboard. And again, everybody should have a scoreboard, or the Japanese would say it's disrespectful. So the scoreboard, again, is part of that problem identification, because I know I should be doing, point whatever for quality, and I'm not. And now I do the problem solving. And so a lot of the problems will be with standard work or with training or whatever, so that I can, as a work team, I can take ownership in that. And then they'll have ideas how to improve. And then get this, when I get their ideas on improve, now we make a new standard work, right? And we train new on it. So that simple process, if you can get that going in your plant, your facility, it is so powerful. The Japanese would say 80% of your issues are coming from the floor and are coming from standard work issues or training issues. So that's again, standard work, scoreboard, and problem solving, and getting the loop to keep continuing. So back to the question, like, that's one behavior you could do, is that, get problem solving started. Because when you start with problem solving, then you'll uncover all those other problems, right? That, well, because when you get to that root cause, well, they weren't trained, we didn't have a standard for it was an inadequate standard, then you'll get to that standard work. So that would be my ideas. And then again, in this company that I went to last week, we just had that conversation yesterday. So they're going to start with that team leader, group leader problem solving. They're going to incorporate standard work, and then they're going to get true scoreboards. But again, you have a dynamic there when you you have to have that dynamic where you have that individual or that group accountability and responsibility, but still working as a team for the overall value stream. And I got a quick story on that, because again, I had a no good Mike son on that one. My downtime on my chassis line, I had 1/8 of the assembly lines, was less than 5 minutes a day. We called it self downtime. Again, that was what our group was causing. Not when we're sitting waiting on cars, or we're sitting full because the line in front of me is stopped. So anyway, we were running good, my line, and I was less than 5 minutes. And so the head Japanese of assembly must have seen me cutting up, or not being serious or something. So he called me up to the main upstairs. We had all the clocks up there for the assembly, and it held your short downtime, your self downtime, your full downtime, your total downtime. And so it's a whole wall of clocks for all 8 lines. And he says, "Mike, son, how are we doing?" He didn't say, "How are you doing?" or "How is your group doing?" He said, "How are we doing?" And I knew, and I'm like, uh-oh, because I knew how I was doing. I was less than 5 minutes, but the total was well over an hour. And so he was teaching me value stream thinking there. And so you're only as good as your weakest link. And so if the worst group is down an hour and 15 minutes, everybody's down an hour and 15. Maybe give or take a couple minutes with the buffers, but basically everybody's down an hour and 15 minutes. Even though I only caused 4 minutes, I'm down an hour and 15. So my behavior was no good. So he says, "Mike, son, what should you do?" And then I looked at the clock the one that had the hour self downtime. Like, I need to go help that line, right? That's got all the downtime. So again, it was this balance between I knew what I owned, and I'm working on solving my problems, and at the same time, I'm looking at the total and helping the one that needs the most help. So that's not an easy dynamic to get, but that was the dynamic they got.
That's awesome, Mike. And again, through leadership coaching, to get that understanding. Paul, I see you got your hand up. I'll hand over to you, Paul.
So I would start with problem solving if I were that gentleman.
Thanks. Oh, hey, Paul, over to you. You're on mute at the minute, mate. There you go.
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Love it.
Hey, all right.
My second copy. First one I destroyed. Sorry. I really love. I've been watching you for a long time, and I really love what you're doing, particularly the stuff you're doing in Kentucky. So well done.
Oh, great.
just I've got a question, but just very quickly, I was also spent some time at that Altona plant in Melbourne when they were making the Camry hybrid.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is everyone was saying it'll be right. There's a problem. It'll be right. It'll be right. And the Japanese visitors or the Japanese leaders who were put into that plant couldn't understand what it meant. And it wasn't a throwaway line. It was actually,
Right.
we'll work hard at fixing it, but it was any. So my question, Mike, is a little deeper than behaviour. I'd just like to see and hear from your perspective on what is the connection with belief or believe.
Yeah.
I know it's been
Yeah.
talked about a lot lately, but I just like, because I know you do a lot of stuff in terms of coaching and the application. What's your perspective on believing in what
Yeah.
you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great one. I've got a slide in my deck. I don't know where I got it. Some leadership principle book. But it was basically, principles and values, then beliefs, then thinking, then actions, then habit, then culture. And I really like that. And then I was a psychology major in school, in college. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to get, I know I didn't want to go on for more schooling. So I got a job at a Toys R Us. I don't know if you had Toys R Us in Australia back in the day, but, and then I got on a Toyota. But anyway, so I understood that your beliefs lead to your thinking, right? Your thinking way. And then your thinking way, of course, it leads to your actions. So I've heard that said, if you want to change your actions, then change your beliefs and change the way you think. And so Toyota, we called it the thinking way. And now I got different companies now. So I appreciate the point because I've been talking about behaviors the whole time and the behaviors. And the company I was at just recently, I think they're calling it mindsets or something. So mindset and behaviors. Mindset. So behaviors is too surface. We got to get down. At least they're going the next level down, right? Is mindset or thinking. And then your next level down would be the beliefs and then the values. So Toyota, again, back on those HR things, we were set up with the principles, teamwork, respect, and those things. And then we were hiring and promoting people based on the demonstration of those competencies, based on those principles. So you get some insight again that the action is a result of the belief. When you're straight up, assessing them on how they would behave in certain situations. And then, of course, once they're hired, then you got the actual evidence of like I'm saying, with a lot of time, the actions were my talking. And the talking would be, again, insight to my thinking, which would be insight to my beliefs. So I'm hoping to give you enough examples of my no good thinking. But my values align with them, right? So because my values align, and that's how I got hired, because my values aligned with respect and humility and those types of things. But then some of my beliefs and actions didn't. So then they could be modified, right? And again, I got so many of those thinking ways of no good Mike son that altered the way I thought, that thinking. So again, that's an interesting question. So again, you're getting me back to my psychology days because I really do the values were matching, but then my beliefs weren't the Toyota way. And I would say that for hiring and promoting, it's like we weren't hiring and promoting for IQ or personality tests or whatever. It was for a fit for the culture, a fit for the values, and a demonstration of the competencies that, again, Toyota says is the Toyota way, and then that problem solving, teamwork, coaching, and those types of things. So I would say, again, insightful and breaking those behaviors down to at least the next level thinking way will get us closer to your point of the beliefs.
Great, Dean. Dean, we've got time for another question. One more question. What do we got? Who's got a question that's going through your mind on what we've covered today, which has been amazing?
I'll have a go. I've been trying
Thanks,
to
Andrew.
form it in my mind of how it can translate into words. It goes to, like, obviously Toyota's like a company that goes across the globe, and part of that is kind of there's cultures that are like defined through the geographic location of what they are. And even though Toyota has things like they've got standard systems right through the company, how much do the systems have to change to match the geographical sort of like idiosyncrasies and cultural aspects that happen in? And it's based off an observation that I can see where companies in Australia at times have wanted to lift and shift like the exact like Japanese system without actually taking into account that there's like a geographical cultural aspect to it that actually enables it to happen.
I understand the question, and I love it, and I appreciate it. And I'll take the rest of the time to answer it, but I was asked the same one this morning, actually. And so I gave the parallel to standard work. So we did talk about operator standard work. I didn't get the next level down of when do we create a standard and we talked about who created a standard, the team members, right? But I might not like Andrew, right? Andrew or Andy?
Andrew's fine, thanks.
Andrew. So you're doing it one way, I'm doing another, so what way becomes a standard? And who's louder or more senior or whatever? No. So we got to measure it. And I told people, people have a misconception of standard work, and they have a misconception of Toyota plants, like you said, around the globe. And they think all the Toyota plants are identical, even in the US, and they're not. And because they have the misconception, they think that you and I are doing the process, putting on the muffler, whatever, that we're doing it exactly the same. And that's not right. And I tell people I'm accused of lean blasphemy when I say that, but that's what I was taught. So the Japanese taught me, again, as a group leader, when I'm working with you, it's like, if it matters, we're going to standardize it. If it doesn't matter, the Japanese called it personal preference. And so people say, give me an example. I'm like, okay, if I'm shooting a fuel tank, Andrew and I are shooting a fuel tank up, it matters what order of the bolts I do because there's a datum pin, engineering, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't matter if I use my left hand or my right hand because I have a good ergonomic position either way. But right across from me was the door line on right-hand doors. I took a group through Texas, and we were at the truck plant, and we took our tram through, and the right-hand doors were all open. We had 10 people that were all shooting left-handed. And it was so obvious. They asked me at the end, they're like, why was everybody shooting left-handed on that line? Because it mattered. Because if I'm shooting that right-hand door right-handed, I got a terrible ergonomic position. But if I'm shooting that left-handed, I've got a perfect ergonomic position. So the standard is shoot it left-handed because it matters. So that's huge. So again, that helped me so much in discussions with operators on what is the standard. Well, it's if Andrew knows how to do it any 2 or 3 seconds quicker, or with less defects, or with better ergonomic rating, then of course I want to know how to do it, because I'm bought into highest quality, lowest cost, and safety. So it's the same thing with 2 plant managers. So they allowed us kind of standard work, again, had that balance, that tension of standardization and innovation, right? And so the same thing goes for 2 plants in America, or a plant in America and a plant in Europe, or whatever. So what Toyota, or the culture for that matter. So again, I put in the book, because when I interviewed the Japanese and asked them the same question, they're like identifying the non-negotiables for the culture. They called it non-negotiables. And so respect for people, non-negotiable. Leader as coach, non-negotiable. Everybody's problem solving, non-negotiable. Andons being used to identify problems, non-negotiable. Because they gave me stories about different parts of the globe that they had big challenges with getting people to pull the andon because of that pride. Because I tell the story where I didn't want to pull it right after I scratched a car. And in some countries, like the whole population, they had to go through what they went with me to get them to pull the andon. But it was non-negotiable, right? Because that's important to the system. That's standard. Other stuff, charts or graphs or templates or whatever, if it doesn't matter, then we don't have to waste time on standardizing it because it's not providing any value. But what we find provides value, and we can measure that, right, with the standard worksheet, and we can measure that with the plan. Then we want to standardize it and share it. It's because I have the same discussion with competition, and I do in Kentucky, I'll do an exercise at the beginning of the workshop, and that the teams can choose cooperation or collaboration or competition, and they always choose competition. Right. So I told them, like, in the culture, healthy competition, and we define healthy competition at Toyota as sharing the best practice. So I'm trying to beat Indiana and make a better system, but then I'm sharing it with them, right? And then if I have to go to Texas to see the best practice, I'm telling them, you're going to come to Kentucky next quarter because I'm going to beat you. So a healthy competition, and that's that sharing across. And even in that, Andrew, some of it was you go for the benchmarking, and some of it was like, you need to go back and do this, or some of it was, here's what we're doing. It's your choice as a leader whether you want to do it or not. So again, that's that tension of standardization and innovation and sharing. So I hope I answered your question. It makes sense.
A really cool point to it, Mike. Andrew, that's good. So everyone, that's the end of the time. It's gone so quick. I think I'll vouch for all of us, Mike, that it was just, again, another amazing, insightful conversation. Everyone, one thing I just want to finish up on before we go is, please consider having a chat to your organizations about what Mike does in Kentucky. The thing I'd say with what Mike's doing, it's America. Like I've heard sometimes when we go to Japan, it can be so culturally quite different that it can boggle our mind. Whereas I think going with Mike to Kentucky, it's pretty close to home, so it can be really insightful for leaders. And this is one, I think, with what Mike's doing, I'll keep promoting forevermore, because I think it's a chance for people, someone who's not currently on the journey or wants to learn more, to really just go see and learn. And Mike, thank you for doing it, mate. And thanks to your son for what he does, setting all this up as well, mate.
Good deal. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I mentioned Toyota and then two other companies. Last time we did it here in April, I had somebody say, man, I'm so glad we went to those second companies, because after Toyota, it was like, I was blown away. It's like, I'm never going to be able to do this back home. But then after I talked to real companies that were like me, then I realized I can do this, and so it was good. So I appreciated that comment from him, because it makes it more real. The other companies, again, I guess they'll share their war stories and their struggles and things. So very helpful. And again, we'll get a discount code for your network.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And Emily and I'll put that out, team. And please just note, even if October doesn't work for your organization, Mike does 2 of these a year.
That's right.
So it's not like even if you miss one, you can't do another. And Mike, I'll keep spreading the word too, because I don't know of a better opportunity for people to truly, just your ability, mate, to talk about under the hood. It's exceptional, Mike. So thank you, mate. Thanks again for coming on and helping us create a better future, mate. I think we all learned from you massively and learned from each other.
Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you all for joining.
Yeah, well, mate, thank you. And thanks, everyone. I'll talk to you all very soon. Thanks again, Mike. Catch you later, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.